Bill, you have done an enormous amount of walking along the coast, both in New South Wales and also Victoria and South Australia, both in relation to the Federation Trust, Federation Track, but also in relation to walking generally over many, many years. How do you equate the Sydney Harbour, the Great Sydney Harbour and its coast and its waterway, with other entrances, other river systems or bays along the coast?
Well, the coastline at Sydney is probably one of the best in Australia. If you think of places like Cape Otway and Cape Bridgewater in Victoria and the areas along some of the South Australian coast, they're magnificent coastal areas. But Sydney's got the harbour, and the harbour's different. And because we grew up in Sydney, we don't realise, we don't understand that it's quite unique that Port Jackson, Broken Bay and Port Hacking are flooded river valleys, and that they don't really occur anywhere else. You don't see them anywhere else south of Sydney or anywhere along the southern coast of Australia. So these are pretty unique places, not only in Australia but in the world.
And Bill, could you tell us a bit about what walking you have done along the coast of New South Wales and Victoria and South Australia, especially as it relates to the Federation Track, but also in relation generally over the last 20, 30 years?
Well, I mean, most of my walking along the coast has been between Barrenjoey and Stanwell Park, because the Federation Track heads inland at Stanwell Park. In Victoria, of course, we followed the coast pretty much around Port Phillip Bay, and then from Queenscliff right along to Lorne on the coast in Victoria, and then returned at Apollo Bay to follow the Great Ocean Walk, and continued along, pretty much along the coast through to Portland, and then follow the Great Southwest Walk right through to Mount Richmond. And then in South Australia, of course, it's an enormous amount of beach walking. It's quite different to here. You don't get the spectacular cliffs, and it's quite different to Victoria. But it certainly has a unique charm, and some parts of the South Australian coast are, as I said, whilst they're not as majestic, they're very, very beautiful places.
I think you first met Lee Sherritt in relation to the Great North Walk when he was preparing for his inaugural walk. Can you tell us a bit about that inaugural walk that was done, the Great North Walk, back in 1988? Was it 88 or 89?
1988, yeah. Well, I only just found out from Lee today, actually, that this was his first long distance walk, and it was my first long distance walk, and I fell in love with long distance walking. Watching the countryside unfold before you is quite different to going in a vehicle. Seeing places that you can't see any other way except on foot is intriguing, and I was captured at that point, and that was what prompted me to start on the Federation Track, initially from Sydney to Melbourne, and then later on with Ian Edwards from Melbourne through to Adelaide.
When you did those recce's, in a sense, you went out with a team, did you not? Some of whom are on this particular walk.
Yeah, well, both Lee, Charles Pizzoliti and David Eager have all walked with me on the Federation Track on some sections, some more than others. So over the years we've all formed pretty close friendships through shared experiences of various kinds. But all of us, I think, are driven by a love for this country, because it is a beautiful country, and I think it's one of the great tragedies of Australia that so many people go overseas to New Zealand or to Europe to go walking, and they don't go walking in their own country.
Bill, what would you say about you've been with this walk, the inaugural walk, over the last 30 days, and you've walked most of this, and you've walked, in fact, over time, all of it, including through the Royal. What do you say about the experience of walking the foreshores, basically, of Sydney's coast and harbour and river system? Because Parramatta, we went right up to the head of the Parramatta River. Well,
most of it's urban walking, which is quite apart from the Royal, which is quite different. It's a different experience, and there are things that you get in urban walking that you don't get when you're bushwalking. For instance, I think the day that we wandered through the byways and lanes of Balmain, seeing the old houses was pretty spectacular. There's also some of the built environment around the harbour, which is spectacular. And there are glimpses of what this magnificent harbour and river estuary would have been like when the Europeans first came. So I think it's been an interesting experience, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And as my last long distance walk, I've thoroughly enjoyed the company.
And would you encourage people to do this walk either in toto over time or sections of it?
I would encourage people to get the maps. I think the maps that the walking volunteers have produced are absolutely first class. And for people to go and walk as far or as short a distance as they like. To go and do the parts around where they live first of all, and then venture forth furthermore. The other tremendous asset that this particular walk has got is transport. It's very, very accessible by public transport, and it's very accessible by vehicles. So it's pretty easy to organise yourself a walk, and if you wanted to do the whole 315 kilometres using public transport. But I certainly think people should aspire, if they live in Sydney, to actually see their city. And I must confess that for the first time in my life, I've actually seen Sydney up close west of the harbour, which is something I've never done before. West of the Harbour Bridge, which is something I've never done before.
One of the fantastic things about this walk has also been the accommodation along the way. We've stayed in places right at the end of each day's walk, literally walking straight into the places.
Yep.
And they have been incredibly good.
No, the accommodation has been excellent. And once again, if people wanted to have a 2-day walking holiday or a 3-day walking holiday, I would encourage them to use these particular routes to do that, because there's plenty of accommodation and it's of a very high standard.
And just to finally get back to the concept of walking, what is it about it from your point of view, that appeals so much? Is it the sense of remoteness, tranquility, the rhythm? How would you describe it?
Long distance walking has been described as a disease, and part of it is because you do, particularly on sections that aren't perhaps as scenic as others, you start to get into a rhythm where the walking process becomes almost automatic and your mind begins to wander. Somebody has described walking as vertical zen. I don't know whether that's true, but there's certainly that factor to it. But the main factor for me has been to see my own country, to see it up close and to see it the way that you can't see it any other way. And I've absolutely enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, thank you so much, Bill, for your contribution to walking. You are probably the most respected long-distance walker in this country, and deservedly so for what you've done, and we thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil.